Hi and welcome. Let's continue on with the channel shout out. Today I would like to focus on At Home with Carrie, Gracie's Home and Gardens 5089, and A Beautiful Jungle. Thanks again to these wonderful channels that bring great information and originality to our wonderful community, and I want to give them thanks for all the hard work that they put in and welcome them to my channel and to this community. Let's make some homemade tomato soup. We're going to start with using my very own home canned tomatoes. I opened it up and then I'm going to put it in the blender and blend it really fine. I'm trying to use up all the tomatoes from 2022. And then I'll go with the 2023, obviously. Then we'll have this year's batch, which I will put away until we get the 2022 and 23 tomatoes used. This is what you listen for when you open up a can, a bottle. Do you hear that pop? That means it was still sealed and it's still good. These tomatoes, I have a bunch of yellow ones. And I'm not afraid to use those. Some people are afraid to can them, but I just make sure I put a lot of citric acid in it, following the directions for proper canning. As soon as I find a recipe that I like online or in a book, I make sure that I take an index card and rewrite it for myself, for two reasons. One, I want to try to make sure I have a hard copy of everything. And another one is someday I'm going to make up recipe boxes for my grandkids with my handwriting and my favorite recipes. I'm doubling this recipe, so I'm going to put half of it in the freezer. For this recipe, it calls for 4 tablespoons of butter. So since I'm doubling it, I will be using the whole stick because that's 8 tablespoons. 2 onions finely chopped, or I'll have to do double that. 3 garlic cloves, doubled. A 56-ounce can of crushed tomatoes with juice. So I just used 2 of my quarts of tomatoes. 2 cups of chicken broth, so that would be 4. 1/4 cup of fresh or 1 to 2 tablespoons of dry basil, so I got to double that. 1 tablespoon of sugar, so that will be 2 tablespoons. 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, so 1 teaspoon. You don't want a tablespoon. And then 1/2 cup of heavy cream or 1 cup of cream. So the first thing I'm going to do is melt the butter, chop up the onions and the garlic. Today I'm using a jarred minced garlic because ours isn't finished growing out in the garden yet. I added 1/3 cup of flour to the butter and the browning onions so we can make a nice thick soup. I'm just going to let it brown for just a minute and cook, and then I'm going to add the tomato sauce. Because I put the tomatoes that were whole in my quart jars and I put them in the blender to blend them up. I also added 2 green onions from my garden that I just picked because I wanted to use them as well. But I put them in the blender so they would be nice and smooth and not chunky. Just add a lot of flavor. Between the green onions and the yellow tomatoes, this is a little bit darker of a sauce, but it's still going to be pretty and it's going to taste incredible. In go part of the tomatoes. Give that a good stir. And then we're going to be adding the basil, the pepper, and the chicken stock. Now I'm just letting the tomatoes and the onions and butter and flour just simmer on a low heat. The recipe calls for 1/4 cup of chopped fresh basil, But I only want to put in just this much. It's a little less than 1/4 cup for the doubled recipe because I don't want any of the flavors to be too strong to overpower the tomatoes. I want them to complement it, but not be so, oh, that's basil kind of thing. So I'm just going to use this little scant 1/4 cup of fresh chopped basil that we actually grew in the garden. I'm also using only 2 cups of chicken broth for the double recipe and not 4 because I want it to be a thicker soup. Now it's at this point that I am going to remove half of this base and freeze it before I put the cream in. That's the best way to go about freezing the tomato soup. Then you thaw it, warm it up, and for the last thing, put in the cream to make it nice and to keep the cream from curdling. Don't forget to clean up as you go. Now I'm going to turn down the tomato base and I'm going to add 2 cups of cream. Don't forget to add the tablespoon of sugar because it really helps to cut the acid of the tomatoes and just makes it more savory. So here we have it, homemade tomato soup out of canned tomatoes. My daughter is making toasted canned chicken and cheese sandwiches. We're pretty excited about that. I hope you have a lovely day. I will put the full instructions down in the show notes below. You have a great day, and believe it or not, on June 17th, it's very, very chilly outside, so this soup will go a long way to warming us up. Have a great day. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you again. I added just a little bit of butter to add to the already yummy goodness. I hope you enjoyed this wonderful soup recipe. I'll put it down below, and don't forget to grow joyfully.